Hi, this is Chris Foreman from Madness, and you're listening to the Stateside Madness podcast.
The only performance that makes it, that really makes it, that makes it all the way, is the one that achieved madness.
Hey you! Don't watch that! Watch this! This is the heavy, heavy monster sound! The nuttiest sound around! So if you're coming off the street and you're beginning to feel the heat, well listen, buster, you better start to move your feet to the rockinest, rock steady beat of madness! One step
Hello, and welcome to the Stateside Madness podcast, the one and only podcast of the official Madness American fan service. I'm Laurie, along with my co-host Poly, here to bring you news, reviews, and deep dives into the nutty sound of the British pop band Madness.
Good morning, Stateside Madness. 4-hour Madstock episode going to be released on the evening before Easter. So put down your Suggs-shaped peeps and your hollow chocolate Tomo. It's time for the Stateside Madness podcast.
So, welcome back. This is the Stateside Madness podcast. I'm Laurie.
And I'm Polly.
And we're excited about this episode because we get to talk about Madstock, which was a really pivotal moment, I guess you could say, in the history of the band. But before we go into that, I want to say thank you again to Hector Walker. He allowed us to interview him 2 weeks ago, very generous with his time, had some great stories to tell. That was actually, I think, probably our second most popular episode to date. Second only to the Chris Foreman episode. So thank you to both gentlemen. We really appreciate it. We love hearing these stories that, happen in the early days of the band, especially. How are you doing, Polly?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful sunny day and signs of spring are showing up. And signs of this horrible malaise we've been under for a year plus, things turning around. I'm hopeful and happy.
I hear that there may be an announcement coming up this week regarding the American tour dates, right? So we're going to listen for that when it happens.
Yeah. There's not a lot of mystery. It doesn't appear that the tour is going to be on. Folks who have noticed Boston canceled, Punk Rock Bowling, the band stepping out of that. It's not that much of a surprise, but what we really, really do want to know is what the dates are going to be and when. So I think that news will be forthcoming very soon.
Yeah, so there was already an announcement that the Boston date has been rescheduled yet again for June of 2022. I feel bad because I posted that to the Stateside Madness Facebook page, not noticing that it was April 1st. And I think some people thought that was an April Fool's prank. It was not an April Fool's prank. The Boston date they have announced will be rescheduled. And so now we're waiting to hear what's going to happen with the rest of the dates. But it does seem very likely if they're going to reschedule Boston, they're probably going to reschedule that entire spring American tour. That would be our guess, right?
They are not going to make multiple trips back and forth across the Atlantic. They're going to do everything in one shot.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, we'll keep our listeners updated when we hear from more about that. And fingers crossed that they might actually add a new date or two, maybe. Fingers crossed.
We can hope. All right. So, Chris, what time is it?
Showtime!
Buster, He sold the heat with a rock steady beat. An earthquake is erupting, but not in Orange Street. A ghost dance is preparing. You got to help us with your feet. If you're not in the mood to dance, step back, grab yourself a seat. This may not be uptown Jamaica, but we promise you a treat. Don't pass it on me over with your funky stand. Shuffle me off my feet. Even if I kept on running, I'd never get to Orange Street. No, there's nothing left to say for the man who set the beat. So I leave it up to you out there to get him back on his feet. Yeah.
Madstock took place in 1992, but the seeds were planted a little bit earlier. So to bring everybody up to speed, what's been going on at this point? So 85, 86, that's when the band broke up. Mike Barson was the first to leave. 86, they released the one-off single, Waiting for the Ghost Train, which was kind of their goodbye. And they fully expected that this was going to be it. They all went their separate ways. Mike was living the good life in Holland. Lee was running a bicycle shop. Woody took up with Voice of the Beehive, had a few other projects on the side. Betters went back to college to become a graphic designer. Everybody had their own, they scattered to the winds at this point. And there was really no intention of them ever getting back together.
Okay, so flash forward to 1991. Virgin Records at that point had ownership of Madness's back catalog, and they were interested in doing a best of compilation. They reached out to Chaz Smash, who at that point had been an executive at Go Discs. And, they started talking, preparing what was going to be the Divine Madness compilation. Chaz was pretty active in that in his capacity at Go Discs. He became involved in the promotion, TV appearances, TV promotions, cover artwork. And part of this was being in contact with different members of the band. So he was sort of the linchpin in all of this stuff happening, and at least in terms of, getting the band talking with each other. He was the center of that solar system. So we owe a bit of this to Chaz.
Yeah, and so he was really very much, in communication with all 7 members of the band as they're trying to put together this Divine Madness compilation. And somehow he gets this idea in the back of his mind, let's get the band back together, right? I guess the turning point was when Carl actually managed to convince Mike Barson, because, Mike being not only one of the founding members, but also he was really kind of the linchpin of the whole thing. So he was off in Holland, living the good life. And when Carl finally convinced Mike to maybe think about coming back, that I think was the first domino. You know what I mean? That all the other dominoes kind of started to fall into place at that point. So in 92, Divine Madness, the release was a success. Now, it wasn't released here in the US. It was a British compilation. It was one of many, many compilation CDs that the band has released. And it started off as a record company cash-in, let's face it, right? But it turned into something more, So as I mentioned, Mike was a little reluctant at first. Chris had just gotten married to his second wife. He was settling down. He was a little reluctant, Better's graphic design career. So there was some reluctance on the part of a number of members of the band. Now, not all members of the band. As I understand it, some of the members were maybe having a little bit of financial problems, and this would have been a good thing for them. But Carl started speaking to a guy named Vince Power. He was a promoter, and they talked about doing a reunion show. And there was apparently at, I think it was at a pub somewhere on St. Patrick's Day in 1992, Vince Power presented a proposal to the 7 members of the band about doing a reunion show. And as part of this agreement, Carl's label Go Discs would have all the rights to the live audio and to the video recordings and to the documentary footage of the show. And that was it. That was that St. Patty's Day proposal is ultimately, I think, what led to this concert called Madstock.
It's one of my favorite topics.
The original show was supposed to be Saturday, August 8th in Finsbury Park, and they added a second show. I think I read somewhere that it was like between the two shows, they sold something like 70,000 tickets. And the band had begun rehearsing in England for a week beginning July 21st of 92. So they all got together, they started rehearsing, getting ready for this. So they basically an intensive week. We're going to rehearse, we're going to get back together, we're going to, try and find our mojo again. And then they traveled to Holland August 1st for what they considered a dry run for this for this festival. And they were performing at a small club at The Hague. And Tomo went missing in action. They couldn't find him anywhere. Apparently, he was stoned out of his mind on some of the local herb, and they found him on a beach somewhere. And I guess he had been with a bunch of teenagers on the beach who were bouncing on trampolines. And if you've ever seen the CD cover for the Madstock CD, that was the inspiration for the cover, because you can see the guys are midair. They had been jumping on trampolines. I thought that was interesting.
Just the other day. Don't seem to want to know you no more. They played it down, giving you their score. Within the first 2 lines, it blankly read, you're not to come see us no more. Keep away from our door. Don't come round here no more. What on earth did you do that for? Oh, wrong, she don't wanna know. She said, what will the neighbors think? They think we don't, that's what they'll think we don't. But I will, cause I know that you think I don't. Oh, wrong, we don't wanna know. We said, we are disgrace to the human race. He said, how can you show your face when you're disgrace to the human race?
So in preparing for the Madstock show, Madness was keen on it not being just like a celebration of their long gone, days past. They didn't really want see it as like a two-tone show. And so they rounded out the bill with some newer bands, up-and-coming bands, some established bands. And so they had Gallon Drunk, not a band I'm super familiar with, Flowered Up, both bands that were kind of around at the beginning of the 90s, kind of just getting their footing, kind of part of all of that new alternative wave. And then he had Morrissey and Ian Dury and the Blockheads, which was really nice to see that they were doing a show with Ian Dury. It's something that happens in England a great deal more than in the United States, where bands curate their own festivals. And I think bringing Ian Dury along was part of that, paying homage to his importance for them. Morrissey did a similar thing when he was able to curate a festival, and he brought along the New York Dolls, which I think was fantastic. And I wish that festivals in the United States had a little bit more of that ethic to them. So hopefully somebody does that here.
I tell you I didn't do it 'cause I wasn't there. I don't believe it just isn't fair. You listen to their side, now listen to mine. I'll think of a story to show you mine was on fire. Now pass the blame and don't blame me. Just close your eyes and count to 3 if you can. 1, 2, 3. And I'll be gone and you'll forget the broken window TV set. It wasn't me either, I'm just his mate. It's all to stand here and watch them.
So Ian Dury, as you mentioned, that's a really good choice because he was so influential on the band and the band's early sound. And as a matter of fact, Polly, you and I are going to be doing an episode about Ian Dury in a few weeks' time. I don't envy those opening bands at all, because crowds can really be very hostile. When you have paid your money and you're here to see Madness, and then who are these other guys, right? Who Gallon Drunk, Flowered Up, you mentioned that you know them. I don't. And I imagine that there was some hostility there. But the person that was on the receiving end of most of that hostility was Morrissey. So again, this was a 2-day festival. Originally, it was supposed to be Saturday, August 8th. They added a second day, which was August 9th. And on that Saturday show, the crowd just got so hostile when Morrissey was playing. They were throwing coins at him. They were throwing bottles at him. They were just a very angry crowd. Now, why this hostility happened, it depends who you speak to. So there was some controversy. When Morrissey appeared on Saturday, he had wrapped himself up in a Union Jack flag, and the backdrop of the stage had some pictures of some skinheads. And so there was some controversy here. Was he courting the National Front? Was he courting racism? That kind of thing. Of course, if you know anything about Morrissey, he loves to push buttons. So how much of that was legit and how much of that was just him trying to get a rise out of people, we don't know. So was that the reason that people were angry and were throwing bottles at him? Maybe. Or maybe it was just that they were Madness fans, and there really is not a whole heck of a lot of overlap between the Madness crowd and the Morrissey crowd. To me, they're two very different genres of band. And I suspect, I wasn't there, but I suspect that a lot of that hostility was just, dude, we want to see Madness, get the heck off the stage. And Morrissey, as you probably know, Polly, will never miss an opportunity to cancel a show. Then decided that he was not going to appear on Sunday, which in itself is a little bit ironic because originally he was supposed to appear on Sunday and all the Morrissey fans were buying the tickets for the Sunday show. So that would have been his crowd. That's the thing that just doesn't make sense. But, every time I've bought tickets to a Morrissey show, the show's been canceled. It's kind of like a running joke over here.
it's late at night. I'm blank and bloody from my life. I haven't time to clean my hands. Can't smell and they sting me through my room. It's well past midnight as I lie in a semi-conscious state. I dream of people fighting me without any reason I can see. In the morning I awoke, my arms, my legs, my body aches. The sky outside is wet and bright. So begins another weary day. So begins another weary day.
Polly, I do think it's important to kind of talk about what else is going on in the world at this point. Here in the United States, I was completely unaware that this concert was taking place. Now, keep in mind, 1992, this was pre-internet. So we didn't get a lot of news of our favorite bands when they were overseas, unless something was reported on like MTV or something, you know? So this was completely not on my radar. I had absolutely no idea whatsoever that this reunion was taking place. I found out about it maybe 20 years later. Literally. I mean, that's how slow I was in finding this out. But 1992, there was quite a bit going on. So we had the Olympics in Barcelona, and that was the USA Dream Team in basketball took the gold. So that really kind of dominated a lot of the headlines here. And then there was also the war in the former Yugoslavia, which was really starting to elicit some controversy. George W. Bush was the president, and at that time, the United States had not gotten involved, right? There was some atrocities that were taking place. There were calls for the rest of the world for the United States to step in and get involved. And so a lot of what was going on that summer is, would we or wouldn't we? You know, would we send troops over to Bosnia and Serbia? So that really was dominating the news. So I don't know about you, Polly. You maybe were a little bit more in the loop than I was in 92 with this stuff.
No, in 1992, I was wrapping up my tour in the Navy and not aware greatly of what else was happening in the outside world.
Take time for your pleasure and laugh with love. Take the hand of another and sing for the wings of the dove. Whoa, whoa, yeah, yeah, yeah. For the wings of the dove. Whoa, whoa, yeah, yeah, yeah. For the wings of the dove. Look up at the rooftop when you're walking round. Don't think for a moment of looking down. Whoa, whoa, yeah, yeah, yeah. For the wings of the dove. Whoa, whoa, yeah, yeah, yeah. For the wings of the dove. Whoa, whoa. For the wings of the dove. Whoa, whoa. For the wings of the
Okay, so it would be important for a podcast where you're not sitting down and watching the DVD or listening to the CD to point out a few highlights of the show. And one would be at the very, very beginning. Lights start to come up. The band walks out on stage, and they stand there. Not exactly what you're used to seeing at the start of a concert. Generally, that is the band's moment to really hype the crowd, and then, of course, just kick off into their first song. But the band walks out, they line up in a row, they face the crowd, and they are standing there. Yeah, there's a bit of a speculation about why they might consider doing that. It just happened. It was kismet. They just all managed to do just about the same thing and just kind of soak in the moment, I guess.
when I saw that though on that DVD, when they are just standing at the front of the stage and just, you know, the lights are off, I just get the chills. I mean, the hair on my arm stands on end. You can feel the electricity. God, I can't even imagine. That had to be so cool being in the audience and seeing that moment, you know?
Yeah, I guess so. I missed the poignancy of it a little bit because I was just kind of like I was expecting the normal entrance for a band where there's a roadie with a flashlight and walking them to their spot and getting their guitar for them and that whole thing. So I was actually confused. I was kind of going like, what's wrong? Why are they doing that?
Yeah, and you know, and you got Suggs, who kind of looks like a rogue CIA agent with his, you know, his trench coat and his hat, and Woody with his ponytail, your very favorite. We know you love Woody's ponytail.
Yeah, we'll get back to that.
Yeah, and yeah, okay. We're gonna discuss? Are we gonna get back to that today?
Okay.
Or no?
Well, okay. So, Stateside Madness fans, just, you know, I don't want to overpromise anything, especially since it's interesting to me and maybe not to everybody else. But I have a bit of an obsession with some of the bandmates' hair. And seeing Woody with a ponytail was a bit shocking to me. It seemed out of place. Certainly did not fit with the two-tone vibe. But as we said before, this wasn't necessarily a two-tone moment. And then, of course, there's Chris. I opine a bit about Chris's hair from time to time, but that's for another episode. And maybe you never know; it'll appear on our Facebook page or maybe our website. But more great things about the band's hair to come.
This was the first time in 6 years that these guys had performed together. And from some of the interviews I've watched, it was a very, very emotional moment for the band members as well. I think Woody said when they started up with One Step Beyond, that first song, he said he practically had tears in his eyes. And they just kind of felt right? They fell into this groove again. And realized that, you know, hey, this is I guess what we're meant to be doing, right?
Yeah, and think about the timing. The band then, so they're probably all ranging in age from 30 to 35. And having been a young man in my 20s, a young man in my late teens, getting together with 6 other guys and trying to make anything harmonious and anything work is just not that feasible. And everybody has a strong personality. You're bound to not get along, but you give it a couple of years and you realize how foolish you could have been, how you could have been kinder, and you grow up a little bit. And you pretty soon, I think you're thinking, I wish I wouldn't have hung up on that. So it would make sense that as they have children growing up, if they have bills piling up, you start to put things in perspective and you can say, yeah, I could get along with those other guys a lot better. It would totally be worth it. So it would make sense to me that they had a lot of riding on it emotionally, professionally, personally. So yeah, it makes sense that they could make it work.
Well, and they've been together in some way, shape, or form since 78. now there's that, 6-year hiatus there, but that is still, that's longer than many marriages. And I understand being married to one guy for that period of time is difficult, but being married to 6, and that's really what it is. It really is, where you have to, communicate, and you have to compromise. And like you said, there's tensions that are gonna erupt, but you learn to work through them, right? For the greater good, for the good of the relationship, or for the good of the band.
Father wears his Sunday best. Mother says she needs a rest. The kids are playing off downstairs. Sister saying in her sleep, brother's got a date to keep, he can't hang around. Our house in the middle of our streets. Our house in the middle of our house. It has a crowd. Yes, there's always something happening, and it's usually...
Yeah, and I would think too that you've heard so many times that people talk about the intoxicating effect of knowing that you've got fans, fan appreciation and stuff like that. Guess what? No band, no fan appreciation, at least for the most part. So I'm sure they missed a great deal of that too.
Oh, absolutely. And you can really tell too. You can really tell that the boys are feeling the love and the energy from the crowd when you watch this DVD footage. So of course they recreated Lee flying through the air for baggy trousers, and now I think it's a staple at a lot of shows. Later on, when they performed at Buckingham Palace for the Queen's Jubilee, was it the Queen's Jubilee?
It was.
Yeah, and then they recreated that with him again flying through the air, and I think they did it at when they performed at the Olympics in 2012. So that's like now one of their signatures is Lee, getting up on wires and doing the sax solo for baggy trousers.
Yeah, it's definitely a trademark of them, from such humble beginnings, being a sort of one-off, poorly executed gag for a video. It sticks in people's minds. It's what they want to see. And of course, another great highlight would have been the surprise guest appearance by Prince Buster. Not really the mentor to the band, but their inspiration, why they started the band kind of in the first place. So he joined Madness for the song he wrote, Madness, as the encore on Saturday. And for 2 songs, Madness being one of them again, and One Step Beyond, of course, which he also penned for the encore on Sunday. And that must have been a fantastic thing to see. Did not make the final cut on the DVD.
Or on the CD. That would just be amazing to hear. I think I'm sure if we look, I bet we can find footage of it on YouTube. There's got to be somebody out there recorded it. They had to have.
I'm sure. Yeah, it probably does exist.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Yes. madness, that's right. Madness, madness, they call it madness. I'm about to explain that someone is losing their brain. Madness, madness, I call it madness.
There was a very interesting aftermath to this show. This is actually kind of legendary. The British Geological Survey was receiving phone calls. People were reporting to the police that they thought there was an earthquake taking place. So the police called the British Geological Survey, and it measured 4.1 on the Richter scale. And one of the geologists actually said, well, I think this might be related to the Madness concert. And of course, everybody else says, no way. But then the next day, August 9th, Madstock again, and there's another earthquake that, again, very comparable, 4.1 or 4.2 on the Richter scale. So I'm just picturing 33,000 fans jumping up and down to like one step beyond and shaking the ground so much. Apparently there were buildings that were being evacuated because they literally thought that there was an earthquake taking place. That just blows my mind, the kind of power and energy that this dancing crowd must have had to measure on the Richter scale.
No, that is no doubt impressive. Makes you wonder why it's not happening a great deal more often. But yeah, I mean, I don't know any other bands that can credit themselves for having started an earthquake.
And when Lee penned those lines, an earthquake is erupting, right? That was prescient, I guess is the word I'm looking for. It's really appropriate.
I suppose so, yes. But coincidentally also, that line from the Prince was sort of name dropping Prince Buster song. So that was a reference as well to the earthquake song by Prince Buster.
So it came full circle, didn't it?
There we go.
Yeah.
Circle of life.
There you go. So as we had mentioned previously, Carl was an executive on Go Discs, and part of the contract, I guess, for the show, Go Discs had the right to release both the audio and the video recordings of the show. So the album Madstock was released in November 1992 on Go Discs in Britain. It peaked at number 22 on the British album charts. Now, interestingly enough, the album does not contain all of the tracks that were actually performed in the show. I think so. The songs that did not make the CD release: Razorblade Alley, Tomorrow's Just Another Day, Take It or Leave It, Swan Lake, and Rockin' in A Flat. So those songs were in the DVD, but they were not on the CD.
You know what it is? I've got the I don't have the Go Discs release. I've got the later one, I think. So they may have thrown a few more back on there.
So The Harder They Come was released as a single in the UK, and it went to number 44 on the charts over there. So The Harder They Come, that's a Jimmy Cliff cover,
That
isn't
is
it?
Jimmy Cliff, yeah. Of course, made famous by the movie, which is, I love that movie. There's a lot of reasons why it shouldn't be good, but I would suggest everybody, after shutting off our podcast, please go watch that movie. It's fantastic. And I love Jimmy Cliff, and what a great song. You know, number 44 is really nothing to sniff at. Neither is number 22 for a live album making charting at number 22. Live albums don't tend to produce the same chart-topping abilities as regular album releases. The not so diehard fans drop off pretty quickly when it comes to concert recordings. People just really want to have the versions of the singles that they hear on the radio. So number 22, no small feat. That's a really good charting for a live album.
And again, that was over in the UK. That was not over here in the States. I don't think that ever registered here on the States. The DVD of the show was included in the 4-disc box set, A Guided Tour of Madness, that was released in 2011. And that was one of the ones that was instrumental in me rediscovering the band right around that time. So it's an import. It wasn't released here in the States. As you know, I feel like I almost need a little recording. Was not released here in the States, and I can just keep reinserting it in the podcast, right? But I really recommend anybody who's, as you're listening to this podcast, you're starting to think, oh, I kind of like some of the stuff that I'm hearing here. That is a really good starting place. If you could get that 4-disc, A Guided Tour of Madness, it's got 3 CDs, but it also has the DVD of the Madstock 92. And it is definitely worth listening to and watching.
I'd like to congratulate Lee Fordham on his wedding. Many happy. Lee Fordham, happy wedding. Yes. I've been driving in my car. It's not quite a Jaguar. I bought it in Brazil. From a bloke from Brazil. It was made in 59. In a factory by the train. It says Morris on the door, the GPO and the before. I drive in it for my job, the governor calls me a sop. But I don't really care. Give me some gas and the open air.
So, all right. So what happens after that?
Well, after that, the band is back and they do the normal sort of band things, with one sort of exception. So they continue to tour. They continue to do more Madstocks. You know, they give it a couple of years. They come back in 94 and then 96 and then 98. And that's sort of it. They do it again in 2009 to celebrate the band's 30th anniversary. But, you know, they exist still as a band from that point on. The 1998 show is released at one point as a DVD in its own right. And, you know, they continue on, but they actually don't put out new music, not for a while anyways. It's not until 1999 that they come up with something new for fans.
And I think that there was actually some pressure from the record company. I think not just Virgin, but I think other companies as well, other labels, really wanted to sign them to bring them on to do new music. And they were really very much resistant to that. I think, I'm not sure, you know, because I don't know what was going on in the minds of the band, but I really kind of think that they saw all of this, okay, you know, we'll do a little bit here, a little bit there. Yeah, we'll do Madstock in 94 and 96, you know, we'll go do this show over in Glasgow, you know, or we'll do this show in Amsterdam or whatever. Just, you know, little one-offs here and there, almost like as a novelty thing. But I don't think they really, maybe they just weren't ready. You know, maybe something needed to happen that they all feel comfortable getting back into the studio and recording again. But Madstock 92 was significant because that really is what brought the band back together. If not for that show, I don't think that we would know who most of these gentlemen were. I mean, maybe, you know, we'd speak of them, you know, in the past tense, you know, but I wonder where they are now. Whereas we're having a different discussion now because we know where they are.
Yeah, or we could be having the discussion that fans of different bands have these days, which is, the band turns out it was just the bass player and a bunch of new people these days. So that didn't really happen, at least not in full to Madness. There was a time when Chris wasn't touring, but for the most part, it was the 7 core members, 6 now. But so we were fortunate in that respect too, that in 1992, they did all come back. And I think it's something greatly missing when it's one guy and a bunch of replacement people. So that's probably what I'm most thankful for.
Well, there's a man I know, at least I used to years ago. I didn't really mind. He used to come in all the time. Of course he had to be fed. I had to give him a bed. He used to keep on my sofa. They used to call him a loafer.
All right. Well, so we had actually asked a few of our Stateside Madness group members, because I know some of them were at Madstock, and we wanted to get some of them to maybe come on and share their experiences. But Polly, literally every person I spoke to, except for one, claimed they were so drunk they didn't remember a thing.
I gotta admit, that does have a tendency to happen at Madness shows. So yeah, no harm, no foul. They had fun.
So, Polly, it's been a while since you've done alternative facts. Are we going to do some alternative facts for Madstock?
I think we should. Only I'm so impressed with myself. I worked really hard on it this week. So yeah, I'd love to, but don't quote me on that. All right, here we go. So, alternate facts about Madstock. Rolling Stone founder Jan Wenner predicted that if he threw a festival with a bunch of muddy hippies, in 20 years' time, Madness would have a much easier time naming their concert. Prince Buster insisted there be an earthquake or he wouldn't perform with Madness. It's kind of his thing. Wool suits get a little sweaty in August. Who knew? Lee had asked to use a jetpack for his baggy trousers gag, but they didn't exist in 1992. Apparently, Betters was promised a sweet kufi if he rejoined the band. Kufi. Google it. Chaz had intended to invite Michael Caine, but he couldn't remember his name. What really caused the earthquake? Loud music? No. Fans jumping around? Also no. The earthquake was caused by the back and forth flapping of Woody's enormous ponytail. And that's all I got.
But what are your final thoughts on Madstock then?
I don't think there's anything new that we haven't already talked about in the podcast, but yeah, I mean, it's a great time. I missed it. Both missed the physical concert, but like you said, being over here, I was unaware that it was a thing. It would be many years later. before I realized that Madness was still a band. Like you were saying, it's before the full-fledged internet we know. These things didn't get communicated to us over here. And yeah.
All right. So talking about, I guess, our future episodes. So the next one that we're going to be doing in 2 weeks' time, we're going to be doing an episode dedicated to Mr. B, Mike Barson. He has a birthday coming up in April. And to coincide with that, we're going to do one of our little biographical episodes that we do. And Polly, you and I can start thinking about our top 5 songs co-written by Mike Barson.
We can do that.
Yes. Oh, and this is going to be tricky because he and I think Tomo are the 2 most prolific songwriters, and we both had a challenge limiting ourselves to 5 songs for Tomo. I think it's going to be even more challenging for Mike.
I think so. Yeah, he's definitely put out the bulk of their work.
Yes, I mean, he's really been the mastermind, the controller for most of the life of the band, and I say that in a good way, not in a negative way. So I'm looking forward to that. And then looking forward, we're also hoping to do in the coming weeks an episode about Ian Dury. So Ian Dury is not specifically a member of the band. He did do one song with the band, Drip Fed Fred. But he was so influential on the band and how they evolved and their sound. And it's really a shame because he is almost completely unknown to American fans. So we're going to talk a little bit about Mr. Dury and his influence, and hopefully, as we've been doing with Madness, hopefully expose a new generation of fans to Ian Dury. And it'll be a little bit controversial. Some of the stuff that he did was a little controversial. But we like controversy.
Yeah, sure we do.
So we hadn't really thought about or hadn't talked about what we're going to close the podcast with, Polly, but I'm thinking maybe The Harder They Come, maybe we should close with that
absolutely.
one. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So hope to see everybody back here in 2 weeks for the Mike Barson episode. And thanks for joining us. Happy Easter to those of you who celebrate it.
Absolutely. And thank you for joining us as well.
Bye from Laurie.
And bye from Polly. Go get a beer, Stateside Madness.
Well, they tell me about the pie up in the sky, waiting for me when I die. But between the day you're born and when you die, they never seem to hear even your cry. So as sure as the sun will shine, I'm gonna get my share now, what's mine? And then the harder they come, the harder they fall, what I know. The harder they come, the harder they fall, what I know. Well, the oppressors are trying to keep me down, trying to drag me underground. And they think that they have got the battle won. Oh, I say forgive them, Lord, they know not what they've done. So as sure as the sun will shine, I'm gonna get my share now, what's mine? And then the harder they come, the harder they fall, what I know. What I say, the harder they come, the harder they fall, what I know. Well, I'll keep on fighting for the things I want, though I know that when you're dead you can't. But I'd rather be a free man in my grave than living as a puppet or a slave. So as sure as the sun will shine, I'm gonna get my share now, what's mine? And then the harder they come, the harder they fall, what I know. you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you all very much for coming. And thank you to everyone here who made it possible. Thank you all very much. See you again one day in heaven or hell.